Hey guys, I'm MacKenzie and I'm a tech reporter at CNBC. And I just want to kind of set up what this panel is about because it's a pretty big topic, Web3, building the future. And I think that really so much of the talk around Web3 is intangible and it centers on this esoteric idea of how crypto could be used. And what I love about the people on stage today is that they're really putting this tech to use in real, in concrete ways across the continent. And I do think that for a lot of people, their understanding of Web3 tech kind of begins and ends with stablecoins. And so many of the panelists today are going to kind of expand the definition and the scope of what use cases look like across Africa. Now, before we get into it, I would love to have each one of my panelists introduce themselves. Matt is to my left from Tether. I'll have him kick us off, and then we'll go down the line.
Thanks, MacKenzie, and hi, everyone. My name is Matt. I am part of the Tether expansion management team. I work with Tether to effectively create awareness, education, and ultimately adoption of USDT and Tether's other stablecoins across Africa.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Yvonne Kagondu. I'm the co-founder of Kushite ICP.Hub East Africa. That's the regional hub for the Internet Computer Protocol in the East African region.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is William Phelps. I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria, and I manage investments at Adaverse, which is a global but specifically Africa-focused Web3 investor and accelerator.
Why don't we, do you want to give us your intro at the end while we get some help on the tech right here?
Oh, yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. So my name is Ayo. I live in Lagos, the Vice President of Developer Relations at Intmax Protocol. Previously at Chronicle Labs, a MakerDAO company, and Polygon Technology in the past. So yeah, that's me.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Louder. Good morning. Hey, we're in Africa. You have to be so energetic. I'm feeling very well today. My name is Shogo Ishida. I'm co-CEO of EMURGO, Middle East and Africa, which is the original commercial entity of the Cardano blockchain. We are the $20 billion US in the market cap. The world, the ranking number 8 in the whole blockchain industry. So I'm very happy to be here today. And I've been seeing a lot of people last night and also 2 nights before. But how do I describe myself? People ask a question, and I always call myself, I'm a Nigerian, Japanese Nigerian. I'm a Japanese by nature, but by the environment and by culture, I'm a Nigerian. So that's why I'm wearing a beautiful Nigerian kaftan today. Happy to have a conversation here today. Thanks.
Yeah, you look great. Okay, so I want to start broad and get right to the question that everyone in this audience probably has on their minds, and that's where each of you on this panel are seeing real-world use cases of Web3 tech. Matt, I'm going to start with you, and I do want to start with this idea of stablecoins because it's just come up in virtually every single conversation I've had since coming to Nairobi. Now, you mentioned that you're on a new, and it's a small team. It's 2 of you on this Africa expansion team for Tether. Now, part of the reason, at least from my perspective, why stablecoins are so disruptive on the continent has to do with the fact that there's virtually no access to dollars. And then you've also got very little liquidity of local African currencies. And so, Matt, I know that you're new to the Tether team. You started in December, but I'd love to hear your take on, why stables are one of the biggest innovations when you think about Web3 adoption in Africa. And if you could also help me unpack some of the chief use cases for stablecoins on the continent, I think that's where we start.
Cool. Thank you, MacKenzie. So what I love about stablecoins is actually the simplicity of the model, right? People think about Web3, they think about lots of complicated things, NFTs, gamification. If you look at stablecoins, all they are is a digital dollar, a tokenized dollar that sits in reserves. And that is really powerful because it gives people across the world in areas where there is limited access to dollars. And it gives people the ability to, one use case, hedge themselves against inflation. So you look at the Nigerian Naira, for example, where I have had colleagues in the past and people lose so much of their purchasing power if they hold Naira. So USDT is being used a lot there as a way to basically just hedge yourself against inflation. UST has also been used a lot for imports and exports. So a lot of commerce that happens to this day is done in dollars. People understand dollars, and commerce happens in dollars. So USDT has allowed people on the continent of Africa to be able to do business and to import goods into Africa using dollars, digital dollars. And to this date, the traditional financial rails and banking systems have made it very difficult to get dollars in Africa, and also incredibly expensive to transact with dollars on this continent. Banking fees are insane. So depending on whatever network you use, to be able to send USDT $1 on a blockchain is incredibly cheap and incredibly simple and incredibly easy to do. So it's really incredible to see the adoption. Like if you look at digital assets in Africa, a huge portion of that, over 50% at any given point in time, is done in stable coins. So there's really been a natural emergence of the use. It's very organic. No one has gone and done marketing for USDT in Africa. People just use it because it makes sense. So you talk about product market fit a lot with startups. Tether has really found that, and that it allows people to access dollars.
We have competing chains on stage in a sense. You've got Tether, which operates on Ethereum and on Tron, and mostly on Tron here in Africa. We also have a big Cardano presence down at the other end of the panel. You've got William, who's at Adaverse, which is investing in Web3 startups in Africa, building on top of Cardano. Shogo runs EMURGO, which is funding Web3 startups across the Middle East and Africa. And as he mentioned, that fund seeded Cardano. William, I want to start with you. A lot of the projects that Adaverse is backing centers around, practical use cases of Web3 and crypto in Africa. I know you're working on things like tokenization and token issuance. Fact check me on this. I think I also heard there are metaverse portcos that are a part of what you're investing in. And one of the things I really like about Adaverse, and I'm sure that you'll speak more to this, is you're supporting a diverse range of talent on the continent. I think you had something like 50 investments across 10 countries since 2021. So I'd love to hear about what some of the companies that you're investing in are doing. What problems are they solving?
Switch the mic on. No, absolutely. And I think just at a high level, one of the things I like about Web3 in Africa in particular is that actually it's a very, very tough market. So really the companies you see not only surviving but also thriving are those that use tangible use cases and I think hit pain points. So the majority, well, I'd say all of the companies we've invested in really apply to that point in one way or another. That is to say they're doing very interesting exploiting, well, not exploiting, but addressing very interesting use cases in a variety of markets. So a couple of examples that I always like to discuss. I mean, Chris is here from Fondbank, we invested in last year, and Fondbank very successfully bridges the gap between crypto, specifically stable coins and mobile money and telco infrastructure, enabling much wider market participation when it comes to stable coins and the value they bring by integrating them directly with mobile money and USSD technology. Similarly as well, Katani Pay, another Kenyan company actually, have been able to integrate crypto with last mile payment channels. So again, USSD integration with great use cases in, for example, UBI payments or the NGO sector. And just as a bit of a curveball, and again, a company I always like to mention is Moment in South Africa, based out of Cape Town. They originally started when we first invested as an NFT platform, which I think a lot of people approach with skepticism. But what they've pivoted to in the past 6 months to a year or thereabouts is actually solar energy and solar funding, whereby addressing the load shedding and the issues with South Africa's grid, they mint private solar developments as NFTs, sell each individual cell to investors, which qualifies those investors for tax breaks with the government, and then pay those NFT holders dividends based on excess energy generated and sold back to the grid, which I mentioned because it's a fantastic example, I think, of a very African solution to a technology which in the rest of the world is seen as largely cosmetic, but really sums up, I think, the potential that Web3 has on the continent.
Shogo, EMURGO is funding Web3 startups in Africa and the Middle East. You guys recognized early on, and this kind of goes to your last point there, William, that you need local talent for local problems. And what you really need are products that people will use at the end of the day. And my question to you is, I'd love to hear more about the ventures that you're working with that are focused on building a crypto ecosystem on the African continent? Like, frankly, Nodo has come up in a lot of conversations, so that's the first one that I think of. But walk me through what you're excited about and what's working.
Good question. Yeah, but thank you very much for the asking such a lovely question. But before that, I just want to touch a little bit about the, the William. This guy, so then, we, EMURGO in Africa, built like a joint venture company specifically targeted on the African continent. And then, so we built an Adaverse and a users, and I'm also like joining the founding director of the team. But this guy is a guy like you should talk to, okay, right after the panel, if you're looking for like a funding, because this guy's a very, very, the great asset for us, okay? But when we talk about
He's going to be mobbed because of that comment.
Yeah, so let me talk about like, local talent and, this thing. So I believe, like from a perspective, and, I'm coming from Asia, right? So then, what are the biggest challenges in Africa is, well, this continent is affected by the global recession the most, okay? What happened last year, we had a Silicon Valley Bank and it corrupts, and then right after that, Signature Bank, and Silvergate Bank corrupts in the U.S., and which affected quite a lot in the financial industry. And then in the global market, VC money inflow declined 42%. In Africa, 46% decline. More than the average of the global the level. And then what happening in the United States and also the African connection? The Matt talks about the cross-border remittance. Well, right after the COVID and also the Ukrainian, invaded by Russia, well, this continent heavily depending upon the wheat imports from Russia and Ukraine, 84%. So that means actually it goes up the inflation rate quite significantly in this region, 26%. What is the average growth rate of the GDP in Africa? Less than 5%. 26% of the inflation rate goes up. That's a huge, huge impact in South Africa. So that's why we had 500,000 people, Africa, migrating to the US before. But last year, the number goes up to 2 million. And then what's happening for them? Because they have to work in the US to send the money back to Africa, their family, their relatives, to help their life. And then when they use the traditional way of the transferring money, you have to pay 20% of the commission fee, which is quite massive because you want to send $100, but when your family receives, it goes down to $80. But since we have USDT, we have USDC on the backside, and the people started using the crypto for the transferring, which only costs 0.2%, which is the really, really innovative way to solve the financial challenges. And then that's why we are also working in Africa as an Cardano. We want to solve the financial challenges. And then in order for that, we invested 72 companies in the past 2 years. We accelerated 20 companies in the soil. And we incubated 3 projects. And then try to nurture and try to educate the young, talented, and the blockchain people here in this Africa. That's what we do.
So Yvonne, ICP has been advocating for crypto for a very long time. I believe you even hosted the first Bitcoin pizza meetup in Nairobi. But for those who haven't heard of it, ICP is a protocol where you can build different apps on top of it. You're also training coders and onboarding developers to Web3. So I feel like the role of ICP is really twofold. Like you're not only building the base tech that coders are creating apps on top of, you're also onboarding all these people, you're training them in the tech itself. I'd love to hear about what you think are the most innovative applications of Web3. What are people building on top of ICP? What's actually sticky and being used?
Well, what we've been advocating at the Kushite ICP Hub is more product building. What most people don't realize about Africa is that we are second largest in consumption with Web3 and crypto products. Sorry about that.
That's perfect. That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, so what we were advocating at the Kushite ICP Hub is more products coming from East Africa, specifically because we have hubs spread out all over the world. We have 25 hubs in all different parts of the world, and East Africa currently, we are the second largest contributors of the Internet Computer Protocol project. And the Internet Computer Protocol is currently the blockchain with the highest number of developer activity currently. And what we push for is the students to be as innovative as possible. We've seen students, we go to university directly. So far, we've done 11 hackathons in the past 4 months, and students are allowed to be as creative as they want to. We actually have a product showcase at 2:45 in the Mwina Master upstairs, Mwina room. We've allowed the students to be as innovative as possible. We have students all the way from Rwanda who flew in just to speak about what they're building on the Internet Computer Protocol. Some of them have gone into agriculture, some of them have gone into DeFi, some of them have gone into very innovative items. So I don't want to speak on them. I want them to speak at 2:45. I invite all of you, including the panelists, to come see what we've been building.
Tease them a little bit, because if they can't make it to that session at 2:45, I think people would love to hear about what they're working on.
Okay, my favorite project so far has been, it's called Saka GPT. It's an AI built on the ICP protocol, and it's using WhatsApp and AI. Another interesting one is a metaverse product built by students from Kabarak University, all built on ICP. We have there's so many. Yeah, but they're quite a number, and I really want to engage with you. The fact that in the past 1 year, ICP grew into the blockchain that has the highest developer activity, and the second position went to East Africa and Kenya specifically, shows that the Africans, and especially East Africans, are very innovative if they're given the chance to and the right resources to. The hub structure is very decentralized, and it gives power directly to the people. We give grants to students, we give opportunities to give developer training, we have certified a number of them, and so far we've built the largest blockchain developer community in East Africa. So we're really proud of our work, and that's why I want you guys to come and see.
I'm going to come to you, Shodipo, in just a minute, but I want to ask you one quick follow-up. Because I feel like, this is something that Shogo is speaking to, SVB and the banking implosion, which obviously led to an erosion of confidence as, the primary banking partner for VCs and for startups just had a real struggle. But another issue that came up in terms of crypto funding and that funding drying up was everyone was talking about generative AI, and nobody wanted to invest in crypto anymore. Like, all the interest and all the oxygen in the room migrated to AI. And Yvonne, something that you just said about one of the projects that you're excited about that is this amalgamation of AI and WhatsApp and crypto. I'm just so curious, because I feel like I don't understand fully the intersection of AI and crypto yet, and how they're complementary and feeding each other. And I've been to some of the sessions, and I'm not, I've heard about fintechs integrating AI for credit scoring, but how is it working for you in this project?
Well, the interesting thing about the Internet Computer Protocol is it allows anything to be built on chain. With most protocols, you have to divide, either you have to use a different cloud service, or you have to use, you can't build your front end on blockchain. But with the Internet Computer Protocol, you can build everything 100% on chain. You can take an actual product from Web 2, we call it Web 2, and move it directly to Web 3. So even our parent company, Definitive Foundation, created a whole grant dedicated to AI, developers on AI to integrate on ICP. With ICP, it allows, how do I put it? It allows developers, basic JavaScript developers, to build anything on the blockchain. Blockchain offers a number of opportunities in terms of decentralization, transparency, scalability, and absolutely anything can be built on chain. Any simple product, any simple website, and that's how we've been able to integrate it.
I'm going to quiz you more on this after we're done with this panel. But down at the end there, Shodipo, you're at Intmax, an Ethereum Layer 2 project that's working on ZK rollups. And I know that sounds super jargony, but at the end of the day, it's just making crypto more usable by making the blockchain, making the capacity larger, and eventually, hopefully, lowering fees, which is what everybody would really like in terms of usability. You guys also have a wallet project. So lots of cool things that you're working on over there. Talk to me more about adoption, what you're working on and what problems you're solving.
Yeah. So at Polygon, I think, rather at Intmax, right? One major problem that we're trying to solve is, as you mentioned, low fees. We want to reduce fees. And number two is the wallet, right? We want to help people spend money, right? People have money, USDT, USDC on exchanges, and spending money is difficult, right? you have to go to Binance or go to Bybit on exchange and go through a long process. But we're trying to slim down all of those processes to make it easy for people on a day-to-day basis to spend money. For example, we worked on a feature we called link transfer. So what that simply means is like it works exactly like payment links. So I can literally put like 1,000 USDT right into a link and choose a method you want to authenticate this money with, either your social media, your email, your phone number, and I send you this link. Right, all you have to do is authenticate that this money belongs to you, and immediately it's in your Intmax wallet, right? That's just one way, right? Secondly, we're also working on a QR code feature where, as a business, right, you can spin up, right, an invoice that's going to have some sort of a QR code. And all I need to do as a user is simply scan this QR code and just authenticate with some sort of a passkey or a PIN, and payment is done, right? So we're trying to help people spend crypto. We're trying to help you spend money, not just USDT, not just USDC, but we're talking MATI tokens, right? Any EVM compatible tokens, right? So on a day-to-day basis, right, you have all these tokens, but it's not easy for individuals to actually spend money, especially in Africa, when they have like all these tokens on an exchange. But with Intmax Wallet, it's 10 times, 100 times easier, in my opinion, right? And I think this is solving a major problem in Africa. I think I'll just say that, yeah.
One thing I wanted to note is that in about 10 minutes, I'm going to give the audience a chance to ask questions. So please do give that a think in case there's anything that you're burning to ask after we get through the next 10 minutes. William, I want to go back to you because beyond investment, you also run a multi-cohort accelerator program working with Web3 companies in Africa, scaling their solutions, tokenizing their platforms. And I feel like that can sound super jargony when you talk about tokenization. So can you unpack that? Like, what does it mean to tokenize your platform, and how is that solving actual problems?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just in terms of context, as you mentioned, not only do we invest, but we also accelerate. So one of our great value adds on the continent is, on the one hand, bringing a lot of the resources from the Cardano blockchain and EMURGO by extension, but also connecting all of our portfolio companies with a whole Rolodex, effectively, of international investors who otherwise wouldn't have that exposure to Africa. And I think it's that latter point, which is, I guess, a good starting point, really, when looking at acceleration in Africa, which is that a lot of international investors who I think are very interested in the continent and the potential it has, and at the same time, a lot of local founders, there's no point of connection. There's no overlap necessarily. And so really what our work is actually bridging the gap between the two through both technology and, I think, network expansion. And one of the ways that we've done that is through tokenization. And part of the reason for this is, on the one hand, because tokens offer fantastic utility and a great, I would say, on-platform opportunity to not only diversify product offering, but also decentralize it, such that platforms that begin and services that begin as very much a local operation suddenly have applicability and usability by those who are not necessarily in the locale in which they're working. And secondly, tokenization also brings a degree of liquidity as well. African primary markets, by and large, are very difficult when we look at, say, IPOs. And Web3 companies are not the obvious target when it comes for, sort of the stock exchange of the continent. And so I think by offering tokens as almost like a share in the companies and allowing founders to not only tokenize and offer tokens to international investors who don't want to maybe take primary market risk in Africa, whilst at the same time, allowing new opportunities of revenue in their companies, we found is a great model that actually, diversifies the product offerings and at the same time, as mentioned, bridges that gap between local founders and international investors.
Okay, so going back to stablecoins, because it is a very hot topic, and like I said, it's come up with almost everyone I've talked to here. Matt, I know that there are two of you right now on Tether's Africa expansion team. You're looking to grow and scale that team. USDT is already prolific on the continent. You spoke to that in terms of adoption. It blows other US dollar peg stablecoins out of the water at the moment. What's your team working on? What are you guys doing? Why are you growing?
So I'm really, really excited about the work that we're doing, and it ranges quite wide. So we believe, like Shogo mentioned earlier, in driving education. So we're really pushing education from the ground up. So from the retail users all the way through to central banks, and collaborating with regulators is something that we're trying to quite actively push on the continent. We're also really big about real world use cases. So we want to enable people who have USDT and access to USDT to actually be able to do more with it. So what that means practically is enabling you to spend your USDT at a network of merchants, for example. So a lot of the work that we'll be doing is also basically trying to enable the payments ecosystem to some extent for USDT to be a native asset that, irrespective of where you are on the continent or in certain countries on the continent, you should be able to pay with USDT as you would with Naira or shillings or rands.
It's like a point of service kind of solution?
To some extent, yes.
Anything else you want to share on that front?
Not so much. I mean, maybe I can talk a little bit about some of the educational focused stuff we're doing. So,
well, before we jump into that, though, I do actually have a follow-up question for you, just in terms of like stablecoin adoption on the continent. You know, the market is getting more competitive, and like Tether, I mean, you look at the market cap, and I mean, it's #1 by a mile. But you know, PYUSD is you know, it's just launched. It's a notable competitor. You've got USDC that's already out there. And I'm not asking you to speak to your competitors, but I am asking, like, how does Tether think about maintaining its lead and differentiating itself? Is it this point of service function, making Tether virtually synonymous with any sort of local fiat currency where you can use it to pay and not think about things? Or what are you guys doing?
So Tether are innovators. I mean, as you know, they were the first to release a stablecoin. So I would say watch the space. There are some interesting things happening behind the scenes, which I cannot comment on directly. But of course, we're making an active effort. We really believe in how Tether is being used in emerging markets specifically, and you can see that by the fact that I'm here today and the fact that we're growing our team on the continent. We're also growing the team largely in Latin America as well as Southeast Asia, where stablecoins and USDT specifically is being used quite a lot.
You mentioned regulation, and I do want to get into that because, you know, like this is a generic question for the panel, so whoever wants to jump in on it. Does it help to have more regulation or less? Because I think about Nigeria, and for the longest time, the central bank was pretty hostile to the crypto space. They recently kind of reversed course, and there are now official guidelines that make it easier to operate if you're a crypto firm. So where does Web3 adoption thrive? Is it in the countries that have been early movers in terms of regulating and policing the space, or where actors can kind of go rogue because there are no rules, and so you don't really have to abide by any sort of policy? And please, anyone can jump in. I'm just so keen to hear an answer to this.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try to jump in on this one, right? So, I think it's not really about. So I don't want to say more regulation, or I think the reason for regulation is the reason governments exist and regulation is to keep the citizens safe, right? So it's not to say, hey, let's not do this, or just to block people out. It's to keep the citizens safe, right? That's why regulations exist. So I think it's about keeping the citizens. That's number one. Number two, right? There's this company out in Denmark, right? It's a layer one. It's called Concordium, and I like what they're doing and how they're thinking about the blockchain, right? Again, right, we have tons of L1s and tons of L2s, right? So, and everybody approaches like solving problems differently, and which is totally fine, right? So, what they are doing, so is at the protocol layer of Concordium, right? They have an ID. So, for anybody to say you want to deploy a contract on chain on Concordium, you have to like identify who exactly you are and fill in a bunch of details, right? So before you can deploy a contract. So, if anything like goes wrong, they know. Okay, so again, on chain, you are still anonymous. They don't know who's who. But then if a specific address commits like a crime, right? So the company, in special circumstances, like I mentioned, can investigate and figure out who this person is, identify what happened. So lots of governmental bodies are just scared because they hear on chain that, okay, this company just stole, or this person stole $250 million, that person stole this, that person stole that, like, oh, I'm not sure I want to be part of this. So they're just trying to keep the citizens safe. So I think what needs to be happening is that L1s and L2s simply just need to liaise with governmental bodies, regulators, lawyers, to craft a regulation that actually works, right? So not everybody just building independently, but also like working together with regulators, lawyers, to kind of, and governmental bodies, educating them about what exactly this thing is, and importantly, setting up use cases that they could say, for example, if we talk about tokenization of assets and all of that, like he said, right, if you take that to governmental bodies, the truth is, many of them don't really care and they don't know. So it has to be brought down to the simplest level where you say, okay, this is a solution that this solves. For example, you have to use examples that they fully understand. And okay, think of, say, healthcare, right? The benefits it brings to healthcare. Build a use case around it. Find a company that does something creative around it and support that company. And let that one company do great things, then say, hey, this is one company in Africa doing great stuff, and how do we regulate this? This is how we could be thinking about this, right? This is how we could be thinking about safety. This is how we could be thinking about security and all this kind of thing. So, but I think just working together with laws and regulators, educating them, building more and supporting more companies doing great stuff in the space, I think would be extremely helpful. But I think, yeah, regulation is super important in this space. We just have to work alongside regulators and lawyers to make it possible and not against them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think regulation is important, but I'm a great believer that innovation thrives in grey areas, particularly in disruptive technology. And a case study that I always use and look at is the difference, I think, in, say, particularly Web3 between Nigeria and Ethiopia. Nigeria, I think, really thrives on maybe the vagueness surrounding Web3 policy. You see there's a great culture of innovation within those spaces. And there's very much the mentality that if it's not explicitly illegal, you can push the boundaries as much as feasible. Whereas if we look at Ethiopia, which at least on paper I think has all of the conditions for a fantastic Web3 ecosystem, there's far more of a history and I think a worldview of regulation and sort of government intervention, such that at least from maybe anecdotally conversations I've had with founders, there's far more of a sense of there are certain red lines, there are certain I guess gaps in legislation and regulation, therefore we shouldn't push the boundary or push the envelope. And again, if we look at sort of, I guess, the end result, we see that Nigeria is a thriving ecosystem, whether it be in terms of stablecoin volume or startups, whereas Ethiopia for the moment is much earlier stage. And so I think, notwithstanding that, we also do need to acknowledge regulation. I mean, grey areas don't go on forever. But in terms of actually igniting that spark, I think, of ecosystem, of growth, of startup culture, there needs to be some vagueness and at the same time the willing to build in that vagueness. But of course, for consolidation, I think long-term growth, that's really where regulation comes in and I think is a force for good.
Yeah, just want to share my personal experience. I spent 6 months in Uzbekistan in 2019. And then what I have done is I have led the international task force team to implement a regulatory framework for the crypto exchange and the security token exchange in Uzbekistan. My counterpart was, the director general, so just another new center president. But in my opinion, well, we successfully helped the government to issue like 3 presidential decrees and also 3 the Congress legislation. And then, so gradually, Uzbekistan people now can enjoy the free transaction of the crypto in the regulated exchanges, within the soil. I think that's probably the best case, and we should definitely consider. Well, in Africa and most of the countries, maybe we do not have a proper regulation, but the government try to implement something. But in Nigerian's case, or maybe a Kenyan case, well, the government is trying to create the local the experts, and then probably limited the the entrance of the international the experts. So then, if you can just come in, because I built a team in that time where Uzbekistan actually accept, well, the team from the US, the team from the UK, and the team like us from Asia, and then we could create an international professional team. So I think Africa can accept that. Well, we're happy to help.
A couple of things that came up. Shogo, obviously you're also investing in companies in the Middle East. Matt with Tether was talking about LATAM being a really big region for them as well. And I don't know if this is an anecdotal understanding, but to me, mainstream adoption of crypto and Web3 tech is just prolific in Africa specifically. And why is that? Why more so than other emerging markets is this tech really clicking with the community? Yvonne, do you want to jump into this for us to start?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, Africa is second in adoption in cryptocurrency and Web3 adoption, yeah. And we believe it's because our problems are different. I believe with Tether, we've seen a lot of stablecoin adoption. With Bitcoin, before Tether came in, Bitcoin came in Kenya specifically. Kenya is around 3rd in adoption in cryptocurrency. That's after Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, around there. We'll rank there. But it first came into adoption in Kenya by freelance workers who are looking for less discriminatory means of receiving payments, a faster means of receiving payments, and Bitcoin came into the picture. And the best way that cryptocurrencies are used into the region, yes, is through remittance and transfer of money, but also through earning. We had the challenge of youth unemployment in this region, and a lot of youths found opportunities online with freelance jobs, with digital jobs. And the adoption came in with people looking online and receiving payments through crypto. And the problems that we face in Africa are different. Yesterday I was at a panel and they were saying how the GDP of Africa is less than the GDP of California. So we can't really describe our problems as the same. But crypto came in to save some of our issues. For example, recently we've been having very high inflation. The Kenyan shilling increased by 13 shillings compared to the US dollar. And a lot of Kenyans found solace in Tether. So I believe a number of our challenges are resolved by cryptocurrencies, and a lot of youths, because they are educated, they have high exposure to the internet, have found their solutions in cryptocurrencies.
Now, I just saw my clock go from 4 minutes to 0, but I'm going to ask one last quick question. I hope that's okay, conference organizers. Biggest limitations. We talk a lot about what's working, but we haven't really talked about what the biggest headwinds for the industry are. I do have one specific question for Matt, and then if you guys want to quickly chime in, because I think we're already over time. Okay, so Tether, the majority of liquidity and activity is on Tron. Tron recently increased its network fees significantly on smart contracts like USDT that take up most of its bandwidth. So my question is, are there any concerns about this? Are there any thoughts about migrating to other chains? I imagine it's not easy to move something like $50 billion from on Tron to another chain, but how are you thinking about navigating this?
Thanks, MacKenzie. What I'll say is that there are obviously constantly new blockchain networks being rolled out, obviously always new innovations, layer 2s, for example, super interesting. Tether isn't doing anything in the space yet, but I could foresee, once the tech proves itself, Tether issuing USDT tokens on a layer 2 network, for example. And yeah, we're constantly looking if the opportunity makes sense, if there's a specific use case that really stands out and that would make sense for us to issue tokens natively on that network, then we're all for it. What I will say is also, it has been interesting to see, Tron is where all the volume is currently, and obviously fees have gotten a lot more expensive. But at the end of the day, the market kind of decides where the volume is. We just issue the tokens natively, and then it's up to the market to determine where they want to do the transacting. And for the most part, the infrastructure in Africa especially has been built using the Tron network. So if you look at exchanges, wallets, they're normally TRC20 wallets. So part of what I'm also trying to do now is just make sure that we're enabling partner exchanges to be able to list new networks that support USDT. So we're kind of giving the full option set to retail users, to merchants, to whoever wants to use USDT.
Thanks for that. Really, really quick. What's keeping you up at night? What are you worried about? What are the biggest headwinds? Anyone?
Yeah, very quick one. Is what I call the usability conundrum in Africa, and I'll be very quick in explaining it. But really, there's no technology that I think most people use on a daily basis that I've been taught how to use. If it's a light switch, a debit card, a TV remote, it's intuitive, right? And therefore, it's very, very easy. And I think one of the problems that crypto and Web3 has, particularly in Africa, is there's actually too much focus on education, in the sense that the people are preoccupied with educating people how to use blockchain solutions, when I think the focus should instead be building solutions that are intuitive. It's the M-Pesa effect, I think, in some respects. It's intuitive to the point that from 2007 onwards, the majority, if not all of Kenya and a lot of East Africa, has been very easily onboarded. And I think that blockchain needs solutions that are more like that and that are more intuitive and usable to actually get mass adoption, rather than trying to place emphasis on education and courses, etc. And I think once that's achieved, you will see much greater penetration of the technology on the continent.
Okay, thank you so much to our panelists and to the audience for joining us, and to the conference organizers for hosting this session. I really appreciate everyone's time.